You do not become powerful when the world notices you. You become powerful when your mind stops begging for permission. The weakness that ruins most lives is not a lack of talent. It is a lack of discipline in private. It is doubt repeated so often that it becomes identity. This audiobook will destroy that pattern. You will learn how to become so calm, so focused, and so consistent that your success no longer looks lucky. It looks inevitable. Chapter 1. Stop announcing and start building. Most people destroy momentum before momentum has the chance to grow. They speak too early. They declare too loudly. They announce goals that have not yet survived a single hard day. And then they wonder why nothing changes. Here is the truth. Talking feels productive. It sounds confident. It creates the illusion of movement. But it is often nothing more than emotional release. It is pressure leaving the system before pressure has done its job. Talk is release. Work is construction. That is the first lesson. When you announce too early, you rob yourself. You take the energy that should have gone into discipline, repetition, and private correction, and you spend it on attention. You spend it on reactions. You spend it on people saying, "That's amazing. You've got this. I'm proud of you." But praise for a plan is not proof of a result. And that is where weak people get trapped. They confuse being seen with becoming stronger. They confuse public intention with private transformation. They think because they said it, they started. They think because others heard it, it became real. It did not. You have a choice. You can keep using words to simulate progress. Or you can become the kind of person who lets silence do the heavy lifting. That's the key. Look around. You have seen this pattern 1,000 times. Someone posts the new business idea before they have made one sale. Someone buys workout clothes, uploads the gym selfie, and quits 2 weeks later. Someone tells all their friends they are writing a book, launching a brand, changing their life, waking up at 5, cutting distractions, becoming disciplined. Then nothing happens. Days pass. Then weeks. Then excuses. Then silence. Not powerful silence. Embarrassed silence. Why? Because the announcement gave them a feeling they did not earn. The attention became a substitute for execution. Talk is release. Work is construction. Say it again. Talk is release. Work is construction. You do not need their permission. You do not need their applause. You do not need witnesses for the first stage of your transformation. In fact, the first stage is often ruined by witnesses. Because once people know, your focus shifts. Now you are thinking about how you look. Now you are managing impressions. Now you are defending your identity before you have built it. Now you are explaining the process instead of protecting it. And weak minds love to explain. Strong minds build. It is not about expression, it's about discipline. That is the difference. The person who constantly announces wants emotional relief. The person who quietly builds wants real change. One wants to feel promising. The other wants to become undeniable. Noise impresses the weak. Results silence everyone. That line matters because it cuts through the whole illusion. Weak people are moved by excitement. They are impressed by language, by ambition, by visible enthusiasm. But real life does not reward speeches. Real life rewards structure, repetition, patience, endurance, correction, boring effort. The kind nobody claps for while it is happening. The quiet performer understands that. They do not disappear because they are lost. They disappear because they are building. They stop talking, not because they have no vision, but because the vision has become serious. They stop trying to look committed and start becoming committed. That is power. Think about the strongest people you know. Not the loudest. Not the most visible. The strongest. The ones whose presence carries weight. Usually, they are not explaining themselves every 5 minutes. Usually, they are not advertising every next move. Usually, they are not trying to convince the room that they are about to become something. They are too busy becoming it. And when they return with proof. Their body changed. Their skill changed. Their business changed. Their habits changed. Their standards changed. Their results changed. And suddenly nobody needs an explanation because the evidence speaks first. Noise impresses the weak. Results silence everyone. You have a choice. You can keep announcing every intention and living with the disappointment that follows. Or you can learn the discipline of withholding. The discipline of keeping the goal close. The discipline of letting the work mature in private before exposing it to public opinion. Because public opinion is dangerous when your foundation is still fragile. A young habit needs protection. A new routine needs privacy. A forming identity needs repetition, not discussion. If you keep dragging your unfinished self into the spotlight, you make growth harder than it needs to be. Protect the process. Reveal the proof. That is not secrecy for the sake of mystery. It is strategy. You protect the process because early growth is vulnerable. You protect the process because not every opinion deserves access to your becoming. You protect the process because once you start explaining yourself, you invite doubt, comparison, and pressure into a stage of life that should be focused on execution. You do not need their permission. You need a plan. You need a standard. You need a routine that still happens when nobody asks about it. That's the key. So what do you do instead? First, stop making declarations for emotional satisfaction. If you catch yourself wanting to announce a new goal, pause. Ask yourself one question. Am I sharing this to create accountability, or am I sharing it to feel important? Be honest. Most people know the answer immediately. Second, replace public excitement with private evidence. Do not talk about waking up earlier. Wake up earlier for 30 days. Do not talk about getting stronger. Train long enough that your body tells the story for you. Do not talk about becoming focused. Remove distractions, keep promises, and let your changed behavior speak. Third, build a scoreboard no one sees. Track actions, not image. Days completed. Hours worked. Promises kept. Sessions finished. Temptations resisted. That is where confidence comes from. Not from saying, "I'm serious now," but from proving it to yourself repeatedly. It is not about visibility, it's about discipline. Fourth, let silence become training. When you feel the urge to tell everyone what you are about to do, use that urge as a signal. Go work instead. Let the desire to speak become the cue to build. Every time you choose action over announcement, you get stronger. That is how authority is built. Private effort creates public authority. People trust consistency they can see. They trust calm confidence. They trust results that do not beg for attention. They trust the person who does not need to narrate every move because every move is already aligned. And that is the deeper lesson of this chapter. The less you explain yourself, the more power you keep. Because explanation leaks force. Announcement leaks force. Performance leaks force. But disciplined silence stores force. It gathers force. It turns scattered ambition into directed effort. Protect the process. Reveal the proof. Say it again. Protect the process. Reveal the proof. This is how the quiet rise begins. Not with noise. Not with performance. Not with public promises. It begins when you stop spending your future on words and start investing it in work. It begins when you become disciplined enough to build where nobody sees and patient enough to wait until the evidence is undeniable. You do not need to look committed. You need to become committed. You do not need their permission. You have a choice. Talk is release. Work is construction. Master that, and you stop leaking power. Master that, and you become dangerous in silence. Master that, and you begin to understand the central truth of this entire book. Strength is built in private long before it is recognized in public. You stopped announcing. Now you need to understand why your mind keeps escaping hard action in the first place. Chapter 2. Your mind is weak because you let it negotiate. Most people do not lose because life is too hard. They lose because they keep bargaining with themselves. They wake up and negotiate. They sit down to work and negotiate. They feel discomfort and negotiate. They face resistance and negotiate. They know what must be done, but instead of giving a command, they open a conversation. That is the weakness. Not pain. Not pressure. Not difficulty. Negotiation. A negotiated mind is a defeated mind. Read that again. A negotiated mind is a defeated mind. The moment you say, "I'll do it later," you weaken authority. The moment you say, "Maybe tomorrow," you train hesitation. The moment you say, "I just need to feel better first," you hand control to emotion. And emotion is a terrible leader. Emotion changes by the hour. Emotion is unstable. Emotion loves comfort. Emotion loves delay. Emotion loves the soft language that makes surrender sound reasonable. But life does not improve because your excuses sound intelligent. You have a choice. You can keep asking your mind what it feels like doing, or you can start telling your mind what happens next. That's the key. Mental weakness is rarely dramatic at first. It does not always look like collapse. It often looks polite. It sounds harmless. It wears the language of self-care, timing, and flexibility. I'll start Monday. I'll make that call after lunch. I'm not in the right state right now. I'll get back to the project when things calm down. Listen carefully. Every one of those phrases is training. Every excuse is self-training. That is what people fail to understand. The real damage is not in the one skipped workout. The real damage is not in the one delayed call. The real damage is not in the one unfinished project or broken routine. The real damage is in the message sent to the self. The message is this: when things get uncomfortable, I retreat. When the task becomes heavy, I delay. When discipline is required, I ask emotion for approval. And once that pattern repeats enough times, it becomes identity. Now you are no longer someone who skipped a workout. Now you are someone who does not follow through. Now you are no longer someone who delayed one difficult conversation. Now you are someone who avoids pressure. Now you are no longer someone who paused one important project. Now you are someone who lives with unfinished business. That is how weakness forms. Not in one grand failure. In repeated surrender. A negotiated mind is a defeated mind. Think about the person who says they want to get in shape. They set the alarm. It rings. The body is tired. The bed is warm. The mind begins bargaining. 1 more hour. I'll go this evening. Rest is important too. That sounds harmless. But it is not harmless when it becomes a pattern. Because the mind is always listening to what the self allows. Every time the command is replaced by negotiation, the chain of authority weakens. Then evening comes. The workout is skipped. The guilt arrives. The self-respect drops slightly. The person says, "I'll be better tomorrow." And tomorrow, the same conversation happens again. Every excuse is self-training. Or take the delayed phone call. The email that needs to be sent. The proposal that needs to be finished. The message that needs to be answered. None of these tasks are impossible. But they carry friction. They carry emotional weight. So the weak mind looks for escape routes. It says, I work better under pressure. It says, I need to clear my head first. It says, I'll do it when I can focus. No. What it means is this: I have trained myself to obey resistance. That is the problem. It is not about laziness. It is about discipline. It is not about motivation. It is about authority. It is not about how hard the task is. It is about what the mind has learned to do when the task becomes uncomfortable. You don't need their permission. And you do not need your feelings' permission either. That is where strength begins. Strength begins when instruction replaces emotion. Strength begins when the sentence changes from, "Do I feel like it?" to, "This is what happens now." Do not consult weakness. Command it. That line must become part of your nervous system. Do not consult weakness. Command it. The weak mind wants a vote. It wants debate. It wants options. It wants to present evidence for delay. It wants to make comfort sound wise. But your job is not to entertain every internal complaint. Your job is to lead. That's the key. A strong life requires a commanding self. Not a harsh self full of hatred. Not a frantic self full of panic. A commanding self. Calm. Clear. Decisive. A self that does not panic when resistance appears, because resistance is expected. A self that understands that the mind will often prefer comfort, and that leadership means moving anyway. You have a choice. You can build a life ruled by appetite, mood, and excuse. Or you can build a life ruled by standards. And standards do not negotiate. Here is what this looks like in real life. The alarm rings. You stand up before the debate begins. The difficult call appears on your list. You make it before your mind builds a story around it. The project feels overwhelming. You work on the first piece instead of waiting for clarity to descend from the sky. The routine breaks one day. You restart the next day without drama. Why? Because you are no longer asking weakness for guidance. Do not consult weakness. Command it. Now, let's get practical. First, remove the language of delay. Stop saying later, maybe, after, and when I feel like it. These words sound small, but they carry a philosophy. They teach the mind that commitment is optional. Replace them with direct instruction. Now, at 3 p.m., for 20 minutes, before I eat. Specific command reduces escape. Second, shorten the gap between decision and action. Weakness grows in the delay. The longer you wait, the more the mind can bargain. So move quickly. Count down and stand up. Open the document. Put on the shoes. Dial the number. Action interrupts argument. That's the key. Third, lower drama and raise obedience. Many people make discipline harder by turning every task into an emotional event. Stop doing that. A workout is not a moral crisis. A hard email is not a tragedy. A focused hour is not a heroic act. It is just the next instruction. Treat it that way. Fourth, build proof through repetition. The goal is not to dominate one day. The goal is to become someone who obeys their own command consistently. That is how identity changes. Not through speeches. Through evidence. Every excuse is self-training. But so is every act of follow-through. Every time you move without bargaining, you train strength. Every time you keep the promise on a day you do not feel like it, you train authority. Every time you finish what you started instead of escaping into comfort, you train self-respect. That is how the quiet rise continues. Private wins create internal power. Internal power creates external steadiness. And external steadiness is what people call confidence. But confidence is not magic. It is memory. It is the memory of commands obeyed. It is the memory of resistance met. It is the memory of a mind that stopped acting like a child and started acting like a leader. A negotiated mind is a defeated mind. Do not forget that. The world will test you. Fatigue will test you. Boredom will test you. Disappointment will test you. Your own thoughts will test you. They will offer soft exits and polished excuses. They will tell you that delay is harmless and comfort is deserved. But you have a choice. You can keep rehearsing surrender. Or you can rehearse command. You do not ask a weak mind what it wants. You tell it what happens next. Do not consult weakness. Command it. Master that, and you stop leaking power through hesitation. Master that, and your mind begins to trust your word. Master that, and you move one step closer to the central truth of this book. Strength is not found in what you feel. It is built in what you repeatedly do. You stopped announcing. You stopped negotiating. Now it is time to cut the next chain. Chapter 3. Kill the addiction to being understood. One of the most exhausting habits in adult life is the habit of over-explaining. Too many people are not living. They are presenting. They are defending. They are narrating every choice so other people will approve, sympathize, or finally say, "Now I get you." That is not strength. That is dependence wearing polite language. The need to be understood is the need to be carried. Read that again. The need to be understood is the need to be carried. Because when you are addicted to being understood, you are asking other people to hold emotional weight that you should be strong enough to carry yourself. You want them to approve before you act. You want them to validate before you commit. You want them to agree before you move. And the result is always the same. You delay your own life. You have a choice. You can keep trying to make everyone comfortable with your decisions. Or you can become the kind of person who is clear enough to act without a committee. That's the key. A weak person says, "I just need them to understand where I'm coming from." A strong person says, "I know where I'm going." Those are not the same thing. When you need everyone to understand you, you are often not seeking clarity. You are seeking relief. Relief from disapproval. Relief from misunderstanding. Relief from guilt. Relief from standing alone in your own decision. That is why over-explaining feels so emotional. It is not usually about truth. It is about discomfort. It is not about communication. It's about insecurity. That must be understood. Now, clear communication matters. Honest communication matters. Directness matters. But over-explaining is different. Over-explaining is when your words are no longer serving the message. They are serving your fear. Your fear of being disliked. Your fear of being judged. Your fear of being seen as selfish, cold, ambitious, distant, changed, unavailable, firm, or different. So you keep talking. You keep justifying. You keep softening the edges of truth so other people do not feel the weight of your standards. And every time you do that, you weaken your own position. Explain less. Establish more. That line matters. Because weak people believe words create authority. Strong people understand that boundaries, consistency, and action create authority. The weak person explains their standard 10 times and still gets ignored. The strong person states it once, then lives it so consistently that people adjust. That's the key. Look at relationships. How many people stay trapped because they keep trying to be understood by someone committed to misunderstanding them? They explain why they need more respect. They explain why they need honesty. They explain why they need peace. They explain why they cannot continue carrying the whole emotional load. They explain and explain and explain. And nothing changes. Why? Because explanation without consequence teaches others that your words are emotional weather. Temporary. Dramatic. Safe to ignore. Explain less. Establish more. If respect matters, establish it with boundaries. If peace matters, establish it by refusing chaos. If your time matters, establish it by not giving it away to repeated nonsense. You don't need their permission. You do not need everyone to agree that your standard is valid before you protect it. The same thing happens at work. People over-explain deadlines, over-explain their no, over-explain their ambition, over-explain why they cannot carry everybody else's laziness. They think if they say it perfectly enough, no one will be upset. Wrong. Some people will still be upset. Some people benefit from your confusion. Some people benefit from your guilt. Some people benefit from your need to be understood because it keeps you available, soft, and easy to control. So what do strong people do? They become clear, brief, steady, not rude, not theatrical. Steady. They say what is true. They repeat what matters. Then they move. You do not owe a performance. You owe results. That phrase should reset your whole life. You do not owe a performance. You owe results. You do not owe people a long speech about why you are becoming more disciplined. Become disciplined. You do not owe people an emotional essay about why you are protecting your time. Protect your time. You do not owe people a dramatic explanation for why you are changing. Change. Because the more serious your transformation becomes, the less you can afford to perform it. Now look at family dynamics. This is where many people lose enormous amounts of energy. They become adults, but still feel like children asking to be understood. They explain why they need space. They explain why they cannot attend every event. They explain why they are focused. They explain why their priorities have changed. They explain why they are no longer available for every emotional demand. And underneath all of that is the same fear. Please do not think badly of me. Listen carefully. Maturity is not the ability to explain yourself forever. Maturity is the ability to remain calm when not everyone agrees. That is strength. The need to be understood is the need to be carried. Strong people accept a difficult truth. Some people will never understand your growth because your growth removes their access to the old version of you. And when that happens, more explanation will not solve it. More clarity will not solve it. More emotional labor will not solve it. Only steadiness will. Explain less. Establish more. So how do you change this? First, notice when you are speaking from clarity and when you are speaking from fear. If your explanation keeps getting longer, more emotional, and more defensive, you are probably no longer communicating. You are pleading. Stop. Second, shorten your language. Strong people are often simple because simple language reveals settled decisions. I can't do that. That doesn't work for me. I'm focused right now. No, I've made my decision. Calm. Clean. No speech. No performance. Third, let your actions finish the sentence. If you say you value peace, stop returning to chaos. If you say you are serious about your goals, stop giving your best hours away. If you say you are building discipline, stop negotiating with distractions. Actions do what explanations cannot. It is not about being liked, it's about discipline. It is not about sounding good, it's about living clearly. That's the key. Fourth, train yourself to tolerate misunderstanding. This is hard for insecure people because misunderstanding feels like danger. But it is not danger. It is discomfort. And discomfort is survivable. Let people have incomplete opinions while you maintain complete focus. You have a choice. You can spend your life trying to correct every impression. Or you can build a life so solid that wrong opinions lose their power over you. This is where silence becomes strength. Silence is not weakness when it comes from certainty. Silence is not fear when it comes from self-control. Silence is not passivity when it protects your energy from useless conflict. Strong silence says, I know what I'm doing. Weak noise says, please approve of what I'm doing. And the world feels the difference immediately. The mature person is calm, simple, hard to provoke. They do not jump at every accusation. They do not tremble at every misunderstanding. They do not chase everyone down for emotional resolution. They conserve force. They choose words carefully. They move with control. You do not owe a performance. You owe results. Say it again. You do not owe a performance. You owe results. That is how inner power becomes visible. Not through louder speeches. Through quieter certainty. Through cleaner boundaries. Through disciplined action that no longer needs constant explanation to survive. The less you need to be understood, the more stable you become. The more stable you become, the less the world can pull you off your path. And that is the point of this book. Quiet strength is not built by dominating rooms. It is built by mastering yourself in them. You stopped announcing. You stopped negotiating. Now you stop explaining. Good. Because once you stop wasting energy trying to be carried by other people's approval, you are finally ready for the next level of discipline. Building a life that still functions when your feelings do not cooperate. Chapter 4. Build a life that does not collapse on bad days. Most people do not have a discipline problem first. They have a fragility problem. Their life only works when they feel good, when they feel inspired, when they feel clear, when they feel supported, when they feel motivated. And the moment those feelings disappear, the whole structure falls apart. That is not strength. That is dependence on conditions. And conditions always change. Bad days reveal real systems. Say it again. Bad days reveal real systems. Anybody can be focused on a good day. Anybody can be productive when energy is high, sleep was perfect, the mood is right, and life feels smooth. That proves very little. The test is never the easy day. The test is the day you are tired. The day you are discouraged. The day nobody notices your effort. The day your emotions are flat. The day the excitement is gone and the task is still there. That is where your real life is exposed. You have a choice. You can build a life that depends on emotion. Or you can build a life that survives emotion. That's the key. If your system only works when you feel like it, then you do not have a system. You have a preference. And preferences do not carry you very far when life becomes heavy. Look at the average pattern. A person starts strong on Monday. New notebook. New mindset. New energy. They clean the room, write the plan, hit the workout, answer messages, eat clean, feel inspired. Then Tuesday is a little harder. Wednesday gets messy. Thursday brings stress. Friday brings fatigue. Suddenly the routine is gone. The plan is gone. The identity is gone. Why? Because the whole thing was built on emotional momentum, not structural discipline. That is why so many people keep restarting. They are trying to create a durable life using unstable fuel. Mood changes. Standard stays. That line matters because it separates adults from children. A child acts on feeling. An adult acts on standard. A weak person asks, "How do I feel today?" A disciplined person asks, "What does the standard require today?" Those are two completely different lives. It is not about inspiration, it's about discipline. That is the correction many people need. They think the answer is more motivation. Another video. Another quote. Another burst of intensity. Another dramatic promise. But intensity is not reliability. Emotion is not structure. Inspiration is not identity. What you need is a life that still works when the emotional music stops. Bad days reveal real systems. Look at people who only perform when conditions are perfect. They say they are serious, but they need the right playlist, the right weather, the right energy, the right support, the right timing, the right emotional state. If one thing is off, everything stalls. They miss the workout because they are tired. They skip the work block because the mood is low. They abandon the routine because the week felt stressful. But disciplined people are different. They are not magical. They are not always excited. They are not always confident. They are not always emotionally strong. They simply understand that the standard does not disappear because the mood changed. Mood changes. Standard stays. They train while tired. They work while uninspired. They stay consistent while unrecognized. They keep promises while emotionally flat. And because of that, their life becomes stronger than their feelings. That is power. Now understand this clearly. This chapter is not telling you to become numb. It is not telling you to deny emotion. It is not telling you to become robotic. It is telling you to stop giving emotion final authority. There is a difference. Feel what you feel, but do not let what you feel decide everything. That's the key. You do not need to feel powerful to act powerful. Read that again. You do not need to feel powerful to act powerful. This is one of the most important truths in the entire book. Because many people wait for a feeling that never arrives. They think confidence must come first. They think readiness must come first. They think strength must be felt before it can be demonstrated. Wrong. Action often comes first. Strength is often built before it is felt. You act with power, and then power becomes more familiar. You follow the standard, and then self-respect grows. You survive bad days with discipline, and then mental strength becomes real. You have a choice. You can keep worshiping emotional intensity, or you can start respecting emotional neutrality. Emotional neutrality is a superpower because it frees you from the childish need to feel amazing before you do what matters. It says, I do not need to be on fire. I just need to be stable. It says, I do not need a breakthrough mood. I need a repeatable structure. It says, I do not need to feel unstoppable. I need to keep moving. That is maturity. Weak people are addicted to intensity. They want huge surges of motivation, big emotional highs, dramatic fresh starts. But those highs are often followed by equally dramatic collapses. They burn hot and disappear. They confuse feeling strong with being strong. Strong people value steadiness. They respect boredom. They respect routine. They respect ordinary execution. Because they understand that repeatable structure beats emotional drama every time. It is not about passion, it's about discipline. So what do? First, stop measuring the quality of your day by the quality of your feelings. A low-feeling day is not a failed day. A tired day is not a worthless day. A flat emotional state does not mean you are broken. It simply means you are human. The question is not, how alive do I feel? The question is, what can I still execute today? Second, reduce the size of the minimum standard, but never remove it. On good days, maybe you do the full workout, the full focus block, the full plan. On bad days, maybe you do half. But half is still stronger than 0. 10 minutes is still stronger than avoidance. A shortened standard is still a standard. That's the key. Third, stop making bad days more dramatic than they are. A bad day is data, not destiny. It is a weather pattern, not your identity. Do not turn one tired morning into a story about your life falling apart. Return to the next instruction. Drink water. Make the bed. Do the walk. Send the email. Finish the page. Small obedience rebuilds momentum. Fourth, design your routines for reality, not fantasy. Do not build a life that only works when everything is perfect. Build routines that can survive travel, stress, low mood, imperfect sleep, and ordinary chaos. If your system cannot survive a hard week, your system is too weak. Bad days reveal real systems. Fifth, practice acting without emotional permission. When you catch yourself saying, "I'm just not in the right headspace," ask a better question. What action still needs to happen? Then do that. Not because it feels amazing, because it is required. You do not need their permission. And you do not need your mood's permission either. Mood changes. Standard stays. That phrase should live in your head. When the mind says, "Not today," the standard answers, "Do what you can." When the body says, "This is hard," the standard answers, "Keep the promise." When the emotion says, "You've lost your edge," the standard answers, "The system still stands." That is how you become hard to break. Not by eliminating bad days. By outgrowing their control. You do not need to feel powerful to act powerful. And once you understand that, you stop fearing emotional fluctuation. You stop panicking every time motivation disappears. You stop mistaking temporary feelings for permanent truth. You become calmer, simpler, more dangerous. Because now your life is no longer built on excitement. It is built on structure. That is the quiet rise. It is not loud. It is not dramatic. It is stable. It is what happens when the standard becomes stronger than the mood, and your habits keep moving even when your emotions do not. Build that, and you will begin to feel the deeper transformation of this book. Real strength is not intensity. Real strength is stability under pressure. You stopped announcing. You stopped negotiating. You stopped explaining. Now you have learned not to collapse on bad days. Good. Because the next enemy is even more subtle and even more expensive. Chapter 5. The Silent Cost of Seeking Validation. Validation is one of the most expensive addictions in adult life. Not because praise is evil. Not because encouragement has no value, but because the moment you need praise in order to continue, you are no longer in control. The crowd is in control. The reaction is in control. The applause is in control. And anything outside your control is a dangerous place to build your life. If they must clap first, you will always move second. Read that again. If they must clap first, you will always move second. That is the silent cost. You hesitate until someone approves. You soften until someone agrees. You delay until someone notices. You work harder to be seen than to become sharp. And then you wonder why your life feels unstable. It feels unstable because you handed the steering wheel to strangers. You have a choice. You can build your life around attention. Or you can build your life around standards. That's the key. Most people do not realize how often validation controls them. They think they are independent. They think they are self-directed. They think they are ambitious. But look closer. The creator is excited while the views are climbing. Then the numbers drop, and suddenly the passion disappears. The professional works hard when the boss is watching. Then feedback slows down, praise fades, and effort becomes inconsistent. The ambitious person says they are building something meaningful, but the second nobody comments, notices, or congratulates them, their energy drops. Why? Because they were not fueled by purpose. They were fueled by response. And response is unstable. Approval is unstable. Standards are power. That line separates fragile ambition from durable discipline. If you need the world to keep telling you that you are doing well, then the world owns part of your mind. If you need people to recognize your progress before you trust it, then your self-respect is rented, not built. If your effort rises and falls with applause, then you are not following a mission. You are following emotional payment. That is weakness. And weakness always becomes expensive. It costs time. It costs focus. It costs consistency. It costs identity. Because when validation becomes the reward, discipline becomes conditional. You stop asking, "What needs to be done?" You start asking, "Will anyone notice?" That is the trap. If they must clap first, you will always move second. Look at the creator who uploads every day when people are cheering, but disappears when engagement drops. Look at the entrepreneur who talks big when friends are impressed, but loses momentum when the room gets quiet. Look at the employee who performs when recognition is public, but becomes average when nobody is watching. Look at the person in the gym who trains hardest when compliments are coming, then slowly falls off when no one says anything. This is not rare. This is common. Because most people have not built an internal scorecard. They have built an audience-dependent identity. They feel real when they are seen. They feel valuable when they are praised. They feel motivated when someone confirms that they matter. But real strength begins when you can continue without that. The crowd is late. Discipline is early. Read that again. The crowd is late. Discipline is early. The crowd usually notices after the work is already done. After the habits are already built. After the years of obscurity. After the lonely repetition. After the standards have already shaped the person into someone undeniable. That is how reality works. The crowd celebrates the visible result. Discipline built it long before anyone cared. That means if you are waiting for applause to begin, you are already behind. If you are waiting for recognition to stay consistent, you are already weak in the place that matters most. Because the most important phase of your growth will often be invisible, quiet, unrecognized, unrewarded. And that is where most people betray themselves. They say, "What's the point if no one sees it?" The point is that you see it. The point is that your standards see it. The point is that each private act of follow-through is shaping the person you become. You don't need their permission. You do not need their attention. You do not need their applause to honor your own standard. That's the key. It is not about praise, it's about discipline. It is not about attention, it's about execution. It is not about being recognized, it's about becoming reliable. That is the shift this chapter demands. You must move from external approval to internal standards. That means the day is no longer measured by who noticed you. The day is measured by whether you executed. Did you do the work? Did you keep the promise? Did you follow the standard? Did you finish what had to be finished? That is the scoreboard. Not likes. Not compliments. Not praise. Not validation. Execution. Approval is unstable. Standards are power. Once you understand that, your whole life starts to change. You stop chasing emotional sugar. You stop building for immediate reaction. You stop panicking when the room gets quiet. Because now the reward is deeper. Now the reward is self-trust. Now the reward is identity. Now the reward is the calm that comes from knowing you are not owned by external noise. That is power. Now let's make this practical. First, notice where your effort rises and falls with attention. Be honest. Do you work harder when someone is watching? Do you feel more committed when people praise your progress? Do you lose energy when feedback disappears? Good. See it clearly. You cannot outgrow what you refuse to name. Second, reduce public dependence. Stop broadcasting every step of your process just to get a reaction. Stop checking for approval every time you do something difficult. Stop feeding your discipline to the crowd. Protect it. Let it mature away from noise. The crowd is late. Discipline is early. Third, create a private scorecard. At the end of the day, ask better questions. Not, "Who noticed me?" Not, Did anyone praise me? Ask, did I execute? Did I stay aligned? Did I keep the standard? That is how you train internal power. Fourth, keep moving when nobody responds. This is where real people separate themselves from emotional performers. Keep writing when no one comments. Keep training when no one compliments. Keep building when no one understands. Keep improving when the room is silent. Why? Because silence is not failure. Silence is often the workshop where strength is built. You have a choice. You can interpret silence as rejection, or you can interpret silence as your proving ground. That's the key. The person addicted to validation feels abandoned when attention disappears. The disciplined person feels tested. And tests are useful. Tests reveal what truly drives you. Do you want the work? Or do you want the reaction to the work? Do you want growth? Or do you want applause for talking about growth? Do you want mastery? Or do you want admiration before mastery exists? These are serious questions. Because if you are honest, you will see where you have been moving second. You will see where you waited for clapping before commitment. You will see where you betrayed your own progress because nobody was there to hand you emotional payment. And now you can stop. If they must clap first, you will always move second. Let that sentence shame the weakness out of you. Let it make you cleaner. Let it make you quieter. Let it make you more dangerous. Because the strongest people are not the ones who get the most praise. They are the ones who no longer require it to continue. They can work in obscurity. They can improve in silence. They can stay disciplined in seasons where nobody understands what they are building. And then one day, the visible result appears. And the crowd reacts. But by then, the applause means less. Because the person has already changed. The standard did that. Approval is unstable. Standards are power. Say it again. Approval is unstable. Standards are power. This is how quiet strength grows. You stop asking the world to confirm your value before you act. You stop renting confidence from reaction. You stop betraying your own path every time attention fades. And in its place, you build something far stronger, a private code, an internal measure, a disciplined life that keeps moving whether anyone claps or not. That is the deeper lesson of this book. Real power does not beg to be seen. It builds until it cannot be ignored. You stopped announcing. You stopped negotiating. You stopped over-explaining. You learned to survive bad days. Now you have cut another chain, the need for applause. Good. Because once you stop needing validation to continue, you are finally ready to become the kind of person who is hard to shake when life applies pressure. Chapter 6. Train yourself to be hard to shake. Most people are not defeated by the event. They are defeated by their reaction to the event. The criticism is not always what breaks them. The rejection is not always what breaks them. The delay is not always what breaks them. The betrayal is not always what breaks them. What breaks them is the loss of inner control. What breaks them is the emotional spill, the panic, the overreaction, the need to immediately discharge discomfort. That is weakness. And weakness is loud. Strength is different. Strength is steady. Calm is not passive. Calm is command. Read that again. Calm is not passive. Calm is command. A lot of people still misunderstand emotional strength. They think strength means force, volume, aggression, dominance through noise. They think if someone is calm, they must be soft. If someone is composed, they must be weak. If someone is slow to react, they must be unsure. Wrong. A calm person is often the most dangerous person in the room. Because while everyone else is bleeding energy through emotion, they are preserving energy through control. While everyone else is rushing to react, they are choosing where to place force. While everyone else is collapsing into feeling, they are staying attached to outcome. That's the key. Mental strength is not about becoming emotionless. It is about becoming difficult to disrupt. You have a choice. You can keep letting pressure decide your behavior, or you can train pressure to reveal your discipline. That is what this chapter is about. When people criticize you, what happens? When they mock you, what happens? When they doubt you, delay you, betray you, misunderstand you in public, exclude you, disrespect you, ignore you, or reject you, what happens inside you? Most people personalize everything. That is their weakness. They treat every obstacle like an attack on identity. Every criticism becomes proof they are not enough. Every delay becomes proof life is unfair. Every rejection becomes proof they should stop. Every misunderstanding becomes an emergency. Every disrespect becomes an invitation to perform outrage. And because of that, they become easy to control. Anyone who can trigger you can move you. Anyone who can provoke you can drain you. Anyone who can shake your emotional state can interrupt your mission. Do not react for relief. Respond for results. That line must become law. Do not react for relief. Respond for results. Weak people react because reaction gives temporary relief. It releases tension. It discharges anger. It proves they are hurt. It makes them feel seen. It gives them the fast emotional reward of expression. But relief is not the same as power. In fact, the need for immediate relief often destroys power. Look at criticism. Someone questions your work. Someone dismisses your ability. Someone throws a careless comment your way. The weak mind wants to defend instantly. It wants to explain, attack back, overcorrect, prove worth, win the moment. Why? Because it cannot tolerate the discomfort of being seen imperfectly. But the strong mind asks a different question. What response actually serves the mission? Sometimes the answer is silence. Sometimes the answer is correction. Sometimes the answer is improvement. Sometimes the answer is walking away. Sometimes the answer is nothing at all. Do not react for relief. Respond for results. That's the key. Take rejection. Many people get rejected once and turn it into identity. A message ignored. An application declined. A proposal dismissed. A relationship ending. One no, and suddenly they are emotionally scattered. They obsess. They overanalyze. They make the event mean something permanent about their value. That is weakness through personalization. It is not about rejection, it's about discipline. Discipline says, feel it, then return to the mission. Discipline says, this happened, but it does not get to define the next step. Discipline says, one closed door is not a collapse unless you turn it into one. The same with delay. A delayed result is enough to break impatient people. They start strong, then life takes longer than expected. Progress slows. Recognition does not come. Money takes time. Healing takes time. Trust takes time. Results take time. And because they are emotionally fragile, the delay begins to feel like failure. Then they spiral. Then they doubt everything. Then they either force drama or abandon the path. Strong people are different. They do not confuse delay with defeat. They understand timing is part of the test. So they remain steady. Calm is not passive. Calm is command. Then there is betrayal. This one shakes many people because betrayal wounds pride, trust, and identity all at once. A friend talks behind your back. A partner lies. A colleague takes credit. Someone you helped turns against you. And now emotion wants to explode. Rage wants a stage. Pain wants performance. But again, the question is not, What do I feel like doing? The question is, what preserves my power? That is maturity. Sometimes preserving power means ending access without speech. Sometimes it means clean distance. Sometimes it means legal precision, not emotional chaos. Sometimes it means grieving privately and staying disciplined publicly. You don't need their permission. And you do not need to broadcast your wound in order for it to be real. The one who stays steady controls the frame. Read that again. The one who stays steady controls the frame. This is true in arguments, in negotiations, in leadership, in crisis, in conflict, in public misunderstanding, in moments where everybody is emotional and someone has to remain functional. The steadiest person shapes the environment. Why? Because steadiness creates authority. When others are frantic, the calm person appears larger. When others are noisy, the composed person appears sharper. When others are chasing relief, the disciplined person appears stronger. That is not an illusion. That is visible dominance. Composure is a form of power, and people feel it. This is why drama is so expensive. Drama makes you readable, predictable, easy to manipulate, easy to bait, easy to drain. The more emotionally noisy you are, the less force you have available for action. So reduce drama. Increase stability. That's the key. Now let's make this practical. First, slow down your first response. When pressure hits, do not trust your first impulse. Most first impulses are built for emotional discharge, not strategic outcome. Pause. Breathe once. Delay the text. Delay the speech. Delay the decision. A short pause can save enormous damage. Second, separate event from meaning. Something bad happened. Fine. But stop adding unnecessary story. Criticism does not automatically mean you are worthless. Rejection does not automatically mean you are finished. Delay does not automatically mean you are failing. Public misunderstanding does not automatically mean you must correct everybody. See the event clearly before your ego writes fiction around it. Third, ask one question under pressure. What response serves the mission? Not your pride. Not your anger. Not your need to be right. The mission. This question alone will make you stronger. Do not react for relief. Respond for results. Fourth, train calm in small moments so it exists in big moments. Hold your tone when irritated. Keep your posture when challenged. Stay brief when provoked. Finish the task while annoyed. These small reps are emotional conditioning. You are teaching your system not to spill under pressure. Fifth, stop admiring people for intensity and start respecting people for stability. Intensity can be fake. Stability cannot. Intensity can be a mood. Stability is a structure. It is built, earned, repeated. It is not about emotion, it's about discipline. It is not about proving toughness, it's about preserving control. It is not about winning every moment, it's about staying aligned with the mission. You have a choice. You can become the kind of person whose state is controlled by every external event. Or you can become the kind of person who remains so steady that events lose the power to own your behavior. That is the quiet rise. Not loud anger. Not dramatic speeches. Not public meltdowns disguised as honesty. Quiet command. A hard-to-shake presence. A nervous system trained to stay useful under pressure. A mind that no longer hands its power to mockery, doubt, rejection, delay, betrayal, or noise. Calm is not passive. Calm is command. Do not react for relief. Respond for results. The one who stays steady controls the frame. Say those lines again until they become instinct. Because this is how real authority starts to show on your face, in your voice, in your timing, in your decisions. People trust the one who does not wobble every time life hits. People follow the one who remains functional under pressure. And most importantly, you begin to trust yourself more deeply when you see that discomfort no longer owns you. That is the larger lesson of this book. Strength is not built by avoiding pressure. Strength is built by staying disciplined inside pressure. You stopped announcing. You stopped negotiating. You stopped explaining. You stopped collapsing on bad days. You stopped chasing validation. Now you are learning to remain steady under fire. Good. Because once your emotional state becomes harder to shake, you are ready for the next step, turning discipline from something you do into someone you are. Chapter 7. Discipline must become your identity. Most people treat discipline like a tool. Something they pick up when they feel serious. Something they use during the right season. Something they return to after a failure, a breakup, a setback, a scare, a motivational speech, or a burst of guilt. That is why it keeps collapsing. Because anything you treat like a temporary tactic will disappear the moment pressure rises. Discipline cannot remain something you visit. It must become someone you are. What you do repeatedly is what you become permanently. Read that again. What you do repeatedly is what you become permanently. This is where many people get stuck. They think discipline is about isolated actions. One strong morning. One perfect week. One clean month. One intense comeback. One emotional promise to themselves that this time will be different. But one moment proves very little. One moment can be adrenaline. One moment can be guilt. One moment can be fear. One moment can be performance. Identity is different. Identity is what remains when emotion fades. Identity is what speaks when temptation appears. Identity is what guides behavior without endless debate. That's the key. If discipline is not tied to identity, then every decision becomes a negotiation. Every hard moment becomes a question. Every temptation becomes a conversation. Every interruption becomes an excuse. And the person keeps wasting energy deciding what kind of person they are each day. That is exhausting. And it is weak. A strong identity removes weak decisions. Read that again. A strong identity removes weak decisions. The person who still says, "Should I do the work today?" has not yet built discipline into identity. The person who still says, "Maybe I'll stay consistent this week," has not yet built discipline into identity. The person who calls themselves ambitious but lives in cycles of intensity and collapse has not yet built discipline into identity. And that is where this chapter gets honest. Many people love the image of being ambitious. They love the language. They love the idea. They love being seen as serious, focused, driven, evolving, committed. But their actual behavior tells a different story. They call themselves disciplined, but sleep without structure. They call themselves focused, but touch every distraction. They call themselves ambitious, but quit when progress is slow. They call themselves committed, but break promises to themselves every week. That is not an ambition problem. It is an identity problem. It is not about intention, it's about discipline. You have a choice. You can keep describing yourself by what you hope to become. Or you can start defining yourself by what you repeatedly do. That is the difference between fantasy and transformation. Anyone can claim a future self. Very few people build one through behavior. What you do repeatedly is what you become permanently. That sentence is not motivational. It is mechanical. It is law. Your repeated behavior is writing your identity whether you like it or not. The question is not whether you are becoming someone. The question is who you are becoming through repetition. If you repeatedly delay, you become a delayer. If you repeatedly avoid discomfort, you become avoidant. If you repeatedly betray your own standard, you become fragile. If you repeatedly obey your word, you become trustworthy to yourself. If you repeatedly move with structure, you become stable. If you repeatedly do hard things without drama, you become strong. That's the key. Now think about how much power is wasted because people still treat discipline like an occasional emergency response. They clean up when life gets bad. They get serious when consequences become painful. They focus when they are afraid of losing something. But once the pain eases, the structure disappears. Why? Because the discipline was never identity-based. It was situational. And situational discipline is always weak. A strong identity removes weak decisions. The person who has built discipline into identity does not ask, "Should I train today?" They think, "I train." They do not ask, "Should I tell the truth here?" They think, "I am honest." They do not ask, "Should I waste these hours?" They think, "I protect my time." They do not ask, "Should I keep my promise?" They think, "I am someone who keeps promises." See the difference? One person is debating. The other person is expressing identity. And once discipline reaches that level, life changes. Because now behavior becomes cleaner, faster, less dramatic, less emotionally expensive. A strong identity removes weak decisions. That is why self-concept matters so much. Because the mind is always trying to act in alignment with who it believes you are. If deep down you see yourself as inconsistent, then inconsistency will keep finding a way in. If deep down you see yourself as weak under pressure, then pressure will keep exposing that script. If deep down you see yourself as someone who tries, but does not fully follow through, then your actions will keep matching that identity. So the work is not only to change what you do. The work is to change what you believe repeated action says about who you are. You are not built in one moment. You are built in repetition. Read that again. You are not built in one moment. You are built in repetition. This matters because people keep waiting for one defining event to transform them. One breakthrough. One final decision. One dramatic line in the sand. One day where everything changes forever. That is fantasy. Real strength is quieter than that. Real strength is a daily vote. A vote cast by behavior. A vote cast in small moments. A vote cast when nobody is watching. A vote cast when the emotion is absent. A vote cast when you are tired, tempted, busy, ignored, frustrated, or bored. Each action says, "This is who I am." Each broken promise says it too. That's the key. You are voting every day. The question is, what identity are you voting for? You have a choice. You can keep voting for the weak version of yourself through convenience, delay, and emotional living. Or you can start voting for the strong version through structure, obedience, and repetition. And understand this clearly. Identity-based discipline does not mean perfection. It means consistency of direction. It means when you slip, you do not turn the slip into a new identity. You return. Quickly. Calmly. Without drama. Because the identity remains intact. A disciplined person may have an off day. But they do not become an undisciplined person because of one off day. Why? Because identity is not built in one moment. It is built in repetition. Now let's make this practical. First, stop using vague labels that your behavior does not support. Stop calling yourself focused if your habits are scattered. Stop calling yourself committed if your routines are unstable. Stop calling yourself ambitious if your execution is occasional. Be honest. Honesty clears the ground for real identity change. Second, choose a few identity statements that must be proven through action. Not empty affirmations. Standards. I finish what I start. I keep my word. I train even when I do not feel like it. I protect my mornings. I do not negotiate with basic discipline. These only matter if they are enforced by behavior. Third, reduce decision fatigue by pre-deciding standards. Set training times. Set work hours. Set sleep rules. Set phone boundaries. Set minimum actions. A strong identity removes weak decisions because standards have already spoken. Fourth, when you act in alignment, notice it. Not with arrogance. With clarity. Tell the truth. That is who I am now. Each kept promise is evidence. Each repeated behavior deepens identity. This is how self-trust becomes rational. Fifth, when you fail, do not collapse into character assassination. Correct fast. Resume fast. Learn fast. Weak people use mistakes to confirm weakness. Strong people use mistakes to sharpen standards. It is not about hype, it's about discipline. It is not about one big moment, it's about daily votes. It is not about saying who you want to be, it's about repeating who you are becoming. You don't need their permission. You do not need a perfect past to build a strong identity. You do not need everyone to believe in your new standard. You do not need a dramatic reinvention. You need repetition. Quiet, clean, repeated proof. That is how identity hardens. That is how discipline stops feeling borrowed and starts feeling natural. That is how the quiet rise becomes visible in your choices before it is visible in your results. What you do repeatedly is what you become permanently. A strong identity removes weak decisions. You are not built in one moment. You are built in repetition. Say those lines until they stop sounding like advice and start sounding like law. Because once discipline becomes identity, you stop relying on mood, motivation, and emergency effort. You become simpler, more stable, more automatic, stronger in private, cleaner in public. And that is the larger lesson of this book. True power arrives when strength is no longer something you perform, but something you live. You stopped announcing. You stopped negotiating. You stopped explaining. You learned to survive bad days. You cut your dependence on validation. You trained calm under pressure. Now discipline is becoming part of who you are. Good. Because the next step is what makes that identity visible and dangerous over time. Chapter 8. Let repetition make you dangerous. Most people are not stopped by difficulty. They are stopped by boredom. They can handle pain for a day. They can handle intensity for a week. They can handle excitement for a season. But they cannot handle repetition long enough to become exceptional. They want the breakthrough without the monotony. They want the result without the routine. They want the identity without the repetition that forms it. That is why so many lives stay ordinary. What is repeated becomes powerful. Read that again. What is repeated becomes powerful. Not what is announced. Not what is imagined. Not what is attempted once with emotional intensity. What is repeated becomes powerful. That is the law. Mastery does not usually look impressive while it is being built. That is one of the hardest truths for impatient people to accept. While it is happening, it often looks plain, small, unremarkable, boring. A person writing another page, lifting again, practicing another speech, making another sales call, saving another small amount of money. Showing up again after a quiet loss. Doing the basics. Again. And again. And again. Nothing dramatic. Nothing cinematic. Nothing worthy of applause in the moment. And yet that is exactly where uncommon power comes from. Boring work builds uncommon people. Say it again. Boring work builds uncommon people. Weak people are addicted to novelty. They need fresh excitement, new methods, new hacks, new systems, new plans, new identities every other week. Because boredom makes them feel like nothing is happening. So they quit the basics before the basics have time to work. They change direction before repetition has time to compound. They abandon simple disciplines because simple does not feel impressive. But life does not reward what feels impressive. Life rewards what is repeated. That's the key. Look at business. The winners are often not the loudest people in the room. They are the ones who followed up longer, served better, improved the product steadily, managed cash with discipline, stayed consistent when growth was slow, learned the market by paying attention to simple signals over a long period of time. They kept doing ordinary things with uncommon reliability. The basics, repeated without fail, create the breakthrough. Read that again. The basics, repeated without fail, create the breakthrough. A weak entrepreneur gets excited by the idea of business. A strong entrepreneur respects the daily mechanics of business. Calls returned. Promises kept. Costs managed. Systems improved. Clients served. Skill sharpened. Brand refined. Day after day. No performance. No fantasy. Just repetition strong enough to become results. Now look at fitness. Everyone wants the dramatic transformation photo. Very few people want the months of ordinary training that produce it. The same lifts. The same walks. The same meals. The same sleep schedule. The same discipline on days that feel empty. The same restraint when cravings show up. The same return after bad days. That is where the body changes. Not through heroic moments. Through repeated basics. The basics, repeated without fail, create the breakthrough. The same is true in public speaking. The polished speaker people admire did not arrive through one burst of confidence. They repeated the fundamentals. Speaking slowly. Thinking clearly. Organizing thoughts. Practicing aloud. Learning to tolerate discomfort. Correcting weak patterns. Delivering again. And again. Until what once looked unnatural became natural through repetition. And skill development works the same way. Writing. Selling. Leading. Designing. Coding. Learning a language. Building a reputation. Every meaningful ability becomes powerful through repeated exposure to the same basic demands. The people who become elite are rarely doing something magical. They are doing simple things longer than everyone else with less emotional drama. That is what makes them dangerous. You have a choice. You can keep chasing intensity. Or you can let repetition build force inside your life. That's the key. Most people still disrespect monotony. They think if the work feels boring, it must not be valuable. Wrong. Boredom is often the price of depth. Boredom is often the doorway to mastery. Boredom is often the emotional test that determines whether you actually want the result or just the excitement around the result. It is not about novelty, it's about discipline. It is not about entertainment, it's about repetition. It is not about looking exceptional, it's about becoming reliable enough to produce exceptional outcomes. That is the shift this chapter demands. You must stop seeing repetition as punishment. You must start seeing repetition as power storage. Each repeated action is a deposit. Each completed basic is a vote. Each ordinary day handled well is another brick. And after enough bricks, people call it talent. After enough deposits, people call it momentum. After enough quiet wins, people call it inevitability. But the truth is simpler. What is repeated becomes powerful. Now look at recovery from failure. This is where repetition becomes even more important. A weak person fails and makes the failure personal. They lose once, and everything stops. They feel embarrassed. They disappear. They wait for confidence to return. They need a dramatic comeback story. A strong person fails and returns to the basics. They sleep. They train. They review. They adjust. They re-enter. They keep the structure alive. Why? Because structure survives what emotion cannot. Boring work builds uncommon people. That includes uncommon resilience. The person who can calmly repeat the basics after disappointment becomes hard to break. Because failure no longer destroys the system. It only interrupts a day. And a day can be recovered. A disciplined system can be resumed. That is power most people never build because they are too attached to emotional momentum. You don't need their permission. And you do not need excitement's permission either. You do not need every day to feel meaningful. You do not need every rep to feel inspiring. You do not need constant visible proof that the repetition is working. That is where mature people separate themselves from emotional amateurs. They understand that the most important work often feels ordinary while it is changing them. That's the key. Now let's make this practical. First, identify the boring basics in your life that actually matter. Not 20 things. A few. Your sleep time. Your training schedule. Your work block. Your daily pages. Your follow-ups. Your savings habit. Your morning routine. Find the repeated actions that produce disproportionate results. Second, stop upgrading the system before you have honored it long enough. Many people abandon a useful routine because they are bored, not because the routine is broken. That is self-sabotage disguised as optimization. Stay with the basics long enough to let compounding happen. Third, measure streaks of execution, not emotional highs. Do not ask, "Did this feel exciting?" Ask, "Did I repeat what matters?" That is a better question. That is how adults build real lives. Fourth, learn to respect monotony. When the work feels repetitive, do not interpret that as failure. Interpret it as the path. Say it to yourself, "This is what mastery feels like while it is being built." Quiet. Plain. Repeated. Fifth, become suspicious of the urge to constantly reinvent. Reinvention is often just impatience in a more glamorous outfit. Repetition is what changes people. Not reinvention every 7 days. The basics, repeated without fail, create the breakthrough. Say it again. The basics, repeated without fail, create the breakthrough. This is how repetition becomes elite. It stops being something you tolerate and starts becoming something you trust. You begin to understand that the person who can do the same right things with discipline, humility, and steadiness becomes nearly impossible to compete with. Because most people quit long before repetition reveals its power. And that is why repetition makes you dangerous. Not because it is flashy. Because it compounds. Quietly. Relentlessly. Without asking for attention. What is repeated becomes powerful. Boring work builds uncommon people. Those phrases should live in your body by now. Because this chapter is teaching you one of the deepest truths in the entire book. Strength becomes visible when repetition becomes non-negotiable. The quiet rise is not built on dramatic effort. It is built on basic actions done long enough that the world starts calling you gifted when you were actually just disciplined for longer than they were willing to be. You stopped announcing. You stopped negotiating. You stopped explaining. You learned to survive bad days. You cut the need for validation. You trained yourself to stay calm under pressure. You made discipline part of your identity. Now you understand what gives that identity force over time. Repetition. Good. Because the next step is where all of this becomes undeniable inside your own mind. Chapter 9. Become so solid that doubt has nowhere to live. Most people think doubt is a mystery. It is not. They think it appears from nowhere. They think it is a personality trait. They think it is something in the air, something in the past, something deep and permanent inside them. So they fight it with quotes, with hype, with positive thinking, with speeches in the mirror. And still, the doubt returns. Why? Because doubt often does not survive on truth. It survives on disorder. Doubt grows where discipline is absent. Read that again. Doubt grows where discipline is absent. When your life is cluttered, inconsistent, and full of broken promises, your mind starts filling the empty spaces with fear. When your routines are unstable, your priorities are messy, your body is neglected, your sleep is poor, your tasks are unfinished, and your boundaries are weak, your brain gets the message. The message is this: nothing here is solid. And when nothing feels solid, doubt moves in. That's the key. People keep treating doubt like a feeling problem. Very often, it is a structure problem. It is not about emotion, it's about discipline. That correction matters. Because once you understand it, you stop trying to feel confident before you become ordered. You stop chasing self-belief in your thoughts while your life remains full of evidence that you do not follow through. You stop asking, "Why am I so doubtful?" and start asking, "What in my life is still unstable, unfinished, or undisciplined?" That is a better question. And it leads to real power. Doubt grows where discipline is absent. Look at unfinished tasks. A message you keep avoiding. A project you keep delaying. A drawer full of neglected paperwork. Bills not handled. Calls not returned. Decisions not made. Every unfinished thing takes up mental space. Every loose end whispers the same message: you are not in control. One unfinished task may not matter much, but a life full of unfinished tasks creates internal static. The mind starts to feel crowded, heavy, unsettled. And in that unsettled space, doubt becomes loud. Now look at broken routines. You say you want structure, but your mornings are random. Your sleep is inconsistent. Your work hours drift. Your training disappears and returns in emotional bursts. You keep starting over, which is another way of saying you never stay with a system long enough to trust it. And then you ask why you do not feel stable. Because stability does not come from wanting it. It comes from repeating it. Clean your habits, and your mind will follow. Read that again. Clean your habits, and your mind will follow. This is not glamorous, but it is true. A lot of what people call anxiety about the future is actually chaos in the present. A lot of what people call low confidence is actually self-neglect repeated long enough to become a mental atmosphere. A lot of what people call overthinking is really the consequence of a life with too many leaks. Weak boundaries, poor sleep, messy priorities, digital addiction, bad follow-through, no schedule, no order, no closure, no physical care. And then they expect a strong mind to grow inside a weak environment. That is unrealistic. You have a choice. You can keep trying to think your way out of doubt while living in disorder. Or you can create a life so clean, so aligned, and so disciplined that doubt has less and less room to breathe. That's the key. Confidence is often not a feeling problem. It is a structure problem. Think about weak boundaries. When you keep saying yes to what drains you, when you let people interrupt your priorities, when you hand your best energy to distractions, when you remain accessible to chaos, what happens? Your day gets broken. Your focus gets diluted. Your promises to yourself get pushed back. Then the day ends, and you feel behind, irritated, and unsure. Why? Because you keep proving to yourself that external noise can outrank your internal standard. That weakens trust. And self-trust is the foundation of confidence. Now think about poor sleep. This seems basic because it is basic. But basics run your life. The person sleeping badly, scrolling late, waking inconsistently, and dragging through the day is often not just tired. They are less emotionally steady, less clear, less resilient, less disciplined, and more vulnerable to negative thought. Then they interpret that fog as a deep truth about themselves. No. Sometimes it is not a deep truth. Sometimes you are just under-recovered and under-ordered. Clean your habits, and your mind will follow. That line should simplify your life. Look at messy priorities. Many people feel doubtful because they are scattered. They want 10 things at once. They start 5 projects. They switch direction every week. They chase urgency instead of importance. They are always busy but rarely aligned. That creates inner conflict. And inner conflict creates doubt. Because when your life is fragmented, your mind becomes fragmented. You don't need their permission. You do not need everyone around you to understand your structure. You do not need social approval to become more ordered. You do not need a perfect plan to begin cleaning your life. You need evidence. Real evidence. Not affirmations. This chapter must be clear on that. You do not defeat doubt with empty self-talk. You defeat doubt by becoming a person your mind can believe. Self-belief is earned proof remembered. Read that again. Self-belief is earned proof remembered. That is one of the deepest truths in this book. Confidence becomes believable when action stacks long enough to make trust rational. Not emotional. Rational. When you keep promises. When you complete tasks. When you return quickly after mistakes. When you protect your routines. When you care for your body. When you close loops. When you stop abandoning yourself in small ways. Then the mind starts changing. Not because you demanded confidence. Because you demonstrated reliability. Self-belief is earned proof remembered. Weak people want to feel certain before they act. Strong people create certainty through action. That's the key. Now let's make this practical. First, clean one area of visible disorder immediately. Your desk. Your room. Your inbox. Your calendar. Your task list. Pick one place where chaos has been speaking to you every day. Bring order to it. Not because cleanliness is magic, but because structure sends a message to the mind. I am regaining control. Second, close open loops. Make the call. Send the email. Pay the bill. Finish the form. Schedule the appointment. Decide. Decline. Complete. Every closed loop returns energy. Every completed responsibility removes one more place where doubt can hide. Third, repair your sleep and wake rhythm. Do not treat this as optional. A tired mind is often a doubtful mind. A dysregulated body invites weak thinking. Protect your evenings. Protect your mornings. Simplicity here creates power everywhere. Fourth, reduce your priorities. Stop pretending everything matters equally. It does not. Choose what actually matters in this season and let your schedule reflect it. Scattered attention creates scattered identity. Fifth, track promises kept. Not feelings. Not intentions. Promises kept. Write them down. Small ones count. Waking on time. Finishing the session. Drinking the water. Sending the proposal. Training when tired. Stopping when you said you would stop. This is evidence. And evidence changes the mind. Self-belief is earned proof remembered. Sixth, stop using affirmations as a substitute for alignment. Words can support truth, but they cannot replace it. Saying, I am confident, while living carelessly does not work for long. Your mind knows the difference between hope and proof. Give it proof. It is not about hype, it's about discipline. It is not about wishing, it's about structure. It is not about sounding strong, it's about becoming solid. You have a choice. You can continue living in loose promises and wondering why your mind does not trust you. Or you can become so orderly, so consistent, and so honest in your behavior that doubt begins to starve. That is the quiet rise. Not a loud performance of certainty. A quiet construction of evidence. A cleaner life. A steadier body. A clearer schedule. A stronger boundary. A finished task. A kept promise. A repeated standard. And eventually, something powerful happens. The mind stops arguing so much. The fear gets less convincing. The doubt has fewer places to stand. Because now there is structure. Now there is proof. Now there is a person becoming solid. Doubt grows where discipline is absent. Clean your habits, and your mind will follow. Self-belief is earned proof remembered. Say those lines again until they stop sounding like inspiration and start sounding like instruction. Because that is the lesson of this chapter, and it points directly to the larger truth of this entire book. Mental strength is not built by pretending to be fearless. It is built by making your life so aligned that fear loses its favorite hiding places. You stopped announcing. You stopped negotiating. You stopped explaining. You learned to survive bad days. You cut the need for validation. You trained calm under pressure. You made discipline your identity. You let repetition make you dangerous. Now you are becoming solid enough that doubt cannot easily live inside you. Good. Because there is one final step left. Chapter 10. Make your success feel inevitable. In the end, power becomes visible. Not because you try to look powerful. Not because you force confidence. Not because you perform certainty for other people. It becomes visible because discipline leaves a mark. Quiet discipline. Clean discipline. Repeated discipline. The kind that changes your timing, your face, your language, your standards, your posture, your pace, your focus. The kind that makes people feel something different around you before they can explain it. That difference has a name. Inevitability is the aura of disciplined action. Read that again. Inevitability is the aura of disciplined action. This is where the whole book has been leading. Not to a louder version of you. Not to a more dramatic version of you. To a more solid version of you. A person whose mind no longer leaks through explanation, hesitation, validation, emotional collapse, or disorder. A person whose habits are aligned long enough that the world begins to read certainty before a single sentence is spoken. That's the key. People talk a lot about presence, but very few understand where real presence comes from. Real presence is not charisma alone. It is not style alone. It is not voice alone. It is not appearance alone. Those things can decorate a person, but they cannot hold a person together. Presence comes from congruence. Presence comes from alignment. Presence comes from a life where what you say, what you do, what you tolerate, and what you pursue all point in the same direction. When your habits align, your presence speaks. Read that again. When your habits align, your presence speaks. That is why some people walk into a room and immediately feel substantial. They are not always the loudest. They are not always the most social. They are not always trying to dominate attention. But they carry weight. Why? Because they are not fragmented. They are not split between what they say and what they do. They are not performing one thing while living another. Their discipline has removed contradiction. And contradiction is what weakens presence. A person who talks about standards but lives in chaos does not feel powerful. A person who speaks about vision but folds under pressure does not feel powerful. A person who asks for respect but keeps betraying themselves does not feel powerful. Why? Because people can feel inconsistency. And more importantly, you can feel it. But when your life becomes cleaner, something shifts. You stop chasing the image of power because you are busy building the evidence of power. Do not seek the image of power. Build the evidence of power. That sentence should close the door on performance forever. Do not seek the image of power. Build the evidence of power. Weak people chase the image. They want to sound confident, look focused, appear successful, seem disciplined, project certainty. But the image always cracks under pressure if the evidence is missing. That is why so many people look impressive at first and feel unstable up close. Because image can be assembled quickly. Evidence cannot. Evidence takes time. Evidence takes repetition. Evidence takes standards. Evidence takes pain handled properly. Evidence takes promises kept when no one is watching. And once evidence exists, something remarkable happens. You stop trying so hard. You stop reaching for approval. You stop straining to look worthy. You stop managing every impression. Why? Because a person with evidence does not need to force the signal. The signal is already there. Inevitability is the aura of disciplined action. Think about the person who no longer chases attention because they are consumed by execution. They are not posting every thought, not explaining every move, not reacting to every opinion, not trying to win every room. Their energy has somewhere better to go. Into the work, into the routine, into the mission. And because of that, their posture changes. They stand differently. Not with fake dominance, with earned steadiness. Their speech changes. They say less, not because they are hiding, because they no longer need excess language to support weak conviction. Their standards change. They become harder to distract, harder to bait, harder to pull into nonsense. Their timing changes. They stop rushing for validation and start moving with deliberate control. Eventually, the world notices. But the most important thing is that they noticed first. When your habits align, your presence speaks. That is not magic. That is what happens when inner order becomes external signal. You have a choice. You can keep trying to look strong from the outside in. Or you can build yourself so thoroughly from the inside out that strength becomes obvious without performance. That's the key. This final chapter is not about ego. It is about visible coherence. It is about becoming the kind of person whose discipline has become so normal, so embodied, and so stable that others begin to feel your self-command. Not because you are trying to intimidate them, but because your life is no longer asking for interpretation. It is speaking clearly. It is not about appearance, it's about discipline. It is not about image, it's about evidence. It is not about looking certain, it's about living in alignment long enough that certainty becomes believable. That is the final transformation. You are no longer trying to look strong. You have become hard to doubt. That line matters because it marks the end of childish effort. Children try to look brave. Adults build lives that reduce the need to pretend. When your standards are real, your body knows it. Your timing knows it. Your eyes know it. Your tone knows it. Your decisions know it. Your calendar knows it. Your environment knows it. Everything starts speaking the same language. Command. That is why quiet strength always outlasts loud force. Loud force depends on reaction. Quiet strength depends on alignment. Loud force is often there to cover weakness. Quiet strength has nothing to cover. It has already done the work. Do not seek the image of power. Build the evidence of power. Now let's make this practical. First, stop asking how to appear more confident. Ask instead, what in my life is still out of alignment? Where am I still saying one thing and doing another? Where am I still asking to be perceived a certain way without having built the private evidence to support it? Fix that. Confidence follows repaired alignment. Second, reduce unnecessary speech. Speak clearly. Speak simply. Speak after thought. Your presence gets stronger when your words are supported by behavior. Do not waste language trying to manufacture weight. Let your standards carry the weight. Third, Tighten what you tolerate. Powerful presence is shaped as much by what you refuse as by what you pursue. Refuse disorder. Refuse weak boundaries. Refuse self-betrayal. Refuse chaotic habits. Refuse the constant need to explain, chase, or perform. Standards create signal. Fourth, let execution absorb your hunger for attention. When you feel the pull to prove yourself, turn that energy back into the mission. Train, build, write, sell, learn, lead, organize, improve. Execution is the cleanest answer to insecurity. Fifth, remember that inevitability is not arrogance. It is not pretending success is guaranteed. It is the felt consequence of consistency. It is what happens when your habits become so aligned that progress no longer feels accidental. It feels deserved. It feels repeatable. It feels earned. Inevitability is the aura of disciplined action. The world reads that aura in subtle ways. They read it in how slowly you respond to chaos. They read it in what you decline. They read it in how little you beg for attention. They read it in how steadily you move. They read it in the absence of desperation. They read it in the precision of your standards. And you read it too. You feel it when your days stop contradicting your goals. You feel it when your mind stops bargaining so much. You feel it when your body is no longer carrying the fatigue of self-betrayal. You feel it when discipline becomes less of a struggle and more of a fact. That is the quiet rise. Not loud, not flashy, not needy, just undeniable. When your habits align, your presence speaks. Say it again. When your habits align, your presence speaks. That is how success begins to feel inevitable. Not because the road is easy. Not because life stops testing you. But because you are no longer living as a divided person. You are living as someone whose behavior, values, standards, and mission are finally in agreement. And agreement creates force. You don't need their permission. You do not need the room to believe in you before you begin. You do not need applause to carry yourself. You do not need the image of power. You need the evidence of power. And evidence is built the same way this entire book has taught you to build strength. In silence, in repetition, in order, in emotional control, in private honesty, in daily standards, in work that continues whether anyone is watching or not. That is the larger lesson of this entire audiobook. Mental weakness becomes strength the moment you stop trying to feel powerful and start becoming trustworthy to yourself. Quietly, repeatedly, without performance. You stopped announcing. You stopped negotiating. You stopped explaining. You learned to survive bad days. You rejected validation. You trained calm. You made discipline your identity. You let repetition make you dangerous. You built enough order to starve doubt. Now you understand the final truth. Success feels inevitable when your life reflects command. And from here, there is nowhere else to hide. Nowhere else to pretend. Only one question remains. Will you go live like it? Mental weakness does not disappear because you want better days. It disappears when you stop giving weakness a vote. It disappears when you stop negotiating, stop announcing, stop explaining, stop seeking applause, and start living by standard. That is the lesson. Quiet people are not always weak. Very often, they are the ones building something so real that words would only interrupt it. Strength is not a mood. Strength is repetition. Strength is emotional control. Strength is private discipline carried long enough that public doubt can no longer survive around you. If you want to change your life, then stop waiting to feel different and start behaving differently. Today. Not next week. Not after motivation returns. Today, choose one promise and keep it. Then choose another and keep that too. Build a mind that obeys. Build a life that holds. Build a presence that speaks before you do. Your challenge is simple. Disappear from excuses, return with proof, and do it so consistently that your success starts to feel inevitable.